What's up, y'all? Maybe I'll do like a good few seconds this time of a little Frank the Guitar intro. Um, I don't know, bro. Off the top, on the spot, freestylage, the mileage that I go sometimes is farther than the high road when I'm taking the. Anyway, so this is In the Image Clothing Company podcast, episode 45. What's up, y'all? In the Image Clothing Company is a company where we address the human body's natural function. We come at it from the skeletal system because the fat content comes and goes, and so does the muscle mass at different times. And actually, I'm gonna address something real quick. I've had like puffiness to my body the past few days, and talk about not being so intentional about knowing what you're even putting into your body. I've been drinking this chocolate milk, dude, and it's got just stuff in it I didn't realize it had, and just some unnatural ingredients. And I drank like 3 gallons of that chocolate milk in the past few days, and it's like, dude, yeah, man. Wow. All right. In the Image Clothing Company podcast, where we have discussions on the gospel of Jesus Christ. We also have another third of us, which is the main company side of things, quote unquote, is the way that I word it, where we address the anatomy of the human body and clothing, what those two things are like doing with their relationship. As far as clothing is altering the human body if it's not sitting on it how it naturally works. And there's only one way that the body actually does anything. It's just a mechanical machine. So we talk about clothing and keep it centered and then keep it natural, ideally, to just allow the body to work. Keyword is always that first one there in that sentence, allow. So another third of us, though, that's why one of the reasons that Frank the Guitar here was within this intro is In the Image Clothing Company music. And over there, we make music. I address the setups of instruments to allow the body to work through that way of approaching doing things with our physical, fleshly vessel that we've been given. And so, yeah, what I'm going to do is run through real quick where clothing needs to sit and our couple prerequisites just to allow the body to have a chance to be unaltered. And then we'll get into this episode of the podcast. So, for everybody, if you're a man, if you're a woman, if you are old or young or any amount of fat content or muscle mass or tall or short or anywhere on the earth, ever, pants need to be where they are off of our hips, entirely off the hips, so the hips can just naturally open and move and have their function and ranges of motion and rotations. And the waistline needs to be slightly higher in the front than in the rear, because that core that we have that people like to put so much emphasis on at the gym, you're wasting your time. It should always naturally be activated. It's the whole body, essentially. The core is the center of us, and so from there up it travels, and from there down doing nothing but supporting the body as far as the musculature. This, I don't know why I'm so like silly in this episode, but that's great. It's great. I'll say it once more because it is very great. So yeah, there's no need to try to work out the core when it's just like I used to always, not always, but there'd be a lot of times when I would relate it to an apple within the main company videos out in the field last calendar year, because the core of an apple is where the seeds are. So there's no apple without its core. Same with the human body. And we're just, as a society, broad spread, quite out of touch with the only way that our human fleshly beings actually do anything that they do physically. So, yeah, the tops that we wear, the seams up there need to be behind that little bone, because that's the other end of our collarbones, and that allows our shoulders to be in their neutral position. And then ideally just at the very edges of our shoulders for those edge seams, because that's where the shoulders have their motion in that ball and socket joint of the shoulder. So button-ups are different, right? Button-ups have a band of material across the top of the shoulders rather than just a singular one, so they'll just naturally sit in a good location, except, if there are things that are imbalanced within that specific shirt. So, two prerequisites we have as in the Image Clothing Company, just to allow the body further to be unaltered, rather, in addition to just, in addition. I say that word so many times when I'm talking about these things, when I say the prerequisites after I discuss where clothing needs to sit within the intros. Oh my goodness. I'm just still doing adjustments within my own body as I'm making podcast episodes. That's how it was. That's how it's been, man. And that's really great. So you can see that, I'm speaking out of experience and just, universal truths, universal things that apply to people across the entirety of our earth. And we are called In the Image Clothing Company because we are all universally designed in the image of our living God, who is Jesus Christ. I love how these past few episodes have been not the norm, quote unquote, not the normal layout of intro and things. I really, really do thoroughly enjoy that because it just, changes it up a little bit. So yes, we firstly lace our shoes with the technique that In the Image Clothing Company uses, which you can find wherever you find us on the internet. All that does is allow the foot to be unaltered when it's being paired with tying your shoes evenly over toward the inside on both feet, because there's two sides to a center with a spine, right? 2 feet, one on each of the sides. And so they have to be tied evenly to have an even foundation that travels up the rest of your body, which is something we don't know. A lot of us, I didn't until I was 24 years old. That's really quite weird that we can actually have that happen and be the case, but for me it was. So, second prerequisite in addition to the shoelaces is to remove all the tags from our clothing, because anywhere that a clothing tag is placed inside of it, it's going to cause a gap that's just going to put the body out of its only natural working position. And natural and neutral are synonyms, and so really both of those words mean only, because the body only does what it does. So removing tags is a must, even within the shoes, because they will affect the ankle, either its dorsiflexion or plantar flexion, or those gripped arches within our feet, if there's something in there that is just not supposed to be. It's not doing any good other than the information that it gave you to know what to purchase as far as the size before you tried it on. And yeah, it's got some other information on there as well. But this is funny. Yeah, I mean, I feel good about it. I feel really good about how just relaxed I am in this. I'm just sitting here massaging my pinky fingers. For those of you that are just listening in audio form only, I've made a couple videos for In the Image Clothing Company titled "The Pinky Finger Affects the Entire Body," because it does. So here I am, months after making those videos, still doing little adjustments that need to be done, right? I mean, just stuff needs to be done, and sometimes things take quite a bit of time. Good things take time. That's really just how it is as us beings that are humans. So, all right, let's get into this, because this is episode, as I said, 45. The title of this is So Close. That's the title, because there's a lot of things in our life that we do or think we want to do or try to do or start to do, and it's not quite what we need to be doing, but it feels pretty good because it's so close. And boy, have I had some experience with this, so let's get ready for some stories if you'd like to. If not, then turn this off, that's fine. But if you're sticking around, I'm just kind of giving a little forewarning, if you will. That's what I'm going to be doing, is telling a lot of stories of my own personal experience. So, cool. Guitars. Let's start there. It's just it's a story time episode of the podcast, but really, I mean, it's going to be good. Really, you're going to get things out of this. It's not just if you want to hear my stories, but no, I'm sharing things because we can all relate to the stuff that I'm going to discuss. Now, but I'll just use my personal experience to approach discussing it. I've mentioned in multiple times and ways through In the Image Clothing Company content that I have had 20 guitars. Frank the guitar here, that little cute guitar that you heard in the intro of this podcast episode for In the Image Clothing Company podcast. He is my 20th guitar. And so, yeah, a lot of the guitars I had, that's how it was. They were just so close, but they were not quite what I needed. And that's something that drives you nuts. You know, we're praying through things. We're trying to figure out what we need to do. We know that we're really close, like I'm saying, with whatever it is. But maybe we're just not quite there and we're just barely off with something. And it's like, drives you nuts because you're feeling so good about it because, yeah, it's just about, but there's just something small you need to tweak within it. And that's how it was with guitars for me. And so finally landed on Frank the guitar, and as he is a Yamaha CG S102A, it doesn't come how I need it or how the human body even needs it. I'm not dogging on Yamaha. I love this guitar and they did an amazing job making it, but people just don't know what they don't know, even if it's been that way for a long time. And our hands are rounded, and any kind of guitar that has a flat fretboard and anything on it that is flat, it's just going to alter the body so greatly. Holy cow. I mean, how many times can I talk about that? Meaning I could continue to, and it would be very influential each time. That's funny because that's the word that I'm sticking with. So yeah, I mean, I put a radius in it, as I call it, right? A rounding, like our hands, and there we go. In the saddle, in the nut, and in the fretboard, there we go. It is now rounded to accommodate for the hand of the human body. So I think something to see is just the torment that we go through a lot of the time when we know that we're so close to what we're supposed to be doing or longing for or being called to in a way that we can't even fully explain, but we just know. And it just doesn't quite feel good because we're just slightly off. Now, this can happen if you're in a relationship, which happens quite often, with somebody who, you know, you guys are good friends and you guys, in a lot of ways, can compliment each other. Not just like verbally compliment, but you know what I mean? Like the way that colors complement each other, you know, when things match. And that can be the case to a degree, but the person is just not your person, right? It's not the person you're meant to spend forever with. And so it kind of will drive you crazy because it's like, man, I know that this feels so good. And, you know, there's a lot to this that I can tell is really, really just about, but it's not quite what I need, you know. And that's something that happens, man. And that's unfortunate, you know, because sometimes we get pretty deep into stuff that we shouldn't be, but it's because it is almost like a foreshadowing, if you will. And that's a term that gets used a lot in books. Like if you read a book that somebody's written, and within that book they will write something that's going to give you a little bit of context for what's to come later. And a lot of times that's how things like that are, our relationships with people. A lot of times that really is what happens is we'll get in relationships with people that are pretty similar to the person that we're actually going to end up with when we get in contact with the right person. But they're just not quite. And so we learn a lot of lessons through what that relationship is, and we grow a lot. And yeah, there's a lot of purpose within the things that we don't even think we should have to deal with or don't want to, or you know, the things we don't understand or whatever. Our God uses those things to teach us, and a lot of it's stuff we look at like, man, that was annoying, but really it's, you know, so good to have gone through. So that's how all these guitars were for me. And yeah, big time. Now, it's gonna be a cool episode, dude, because this is something that applies to everything, basically, man. I mean, anything that we do in our lives, man, we can be so close to what we're supposed to be doing, but just like have something just be slightly off, and it's like torment, man. I mean, it's just something that is so hard to deal with because if we don't know what we need to do, if we don't know how to fix it, or we don't know how to change what we need to change, or we don't know what it is that's like that slight offness to it, then we will sometimes just go nuts because like, well, if it feels so good, that must mean it's either right or I'm so close. But if it's not quite and there's something I need to do, I don't know what it is, like in these times, and so we're racking our brains and it's hard to deal with that kind of stuff because one thing that's really hard to do as a human is to not know things. We have this desire to know more, and that's something you see all the time within like scientific communities, people out there doing studies on stuff because they understand things to a degree, but they want to fully know it. And there's so much that we just won't fully know in this life. And no matter what, that's just how it's going to be. So it's just a human trait, man, to just keep trying to like get everything just like dialed in right to where we feel like it needs to be. And a lot of things will get to that point, but it's not our timing. And a lot of things we just want to know to the extent that we won't know in this life. We want more than we should as humans. We're desirous beings. And so, yeah, a lot of things that are just so close, man, so close. And it's funny because, yeah, a little bit of a story that I've told already, but how I removed my records and my baptismal. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that goes into that, really, that I didn't realize the extent of at the time, but from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And so that was just about a year ago, and I'm working toward rebaptism. I don't really have to do much of anything to do that other than wait the time period. There's a year as of now. That's how it's structured within the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. If your records get removed, that you wait before you can reinstate them. So that's where I'm at, and meaning very close to doing that again, and I'm excited, and I love the opportunity to be able to mess up because that's crazy that we're given that. But yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to brush over that. I've talked about that quite a bit within recent episodes. It's just, the ability to mess up. Like, what the? We serve a perfect God, and He is looking at us with love still, and we are just always imperfect. It's crazy. So, while I was not like a member of the church, I went to a few Christian churches, and I say a few, but really it was two. And while I was there, that's the feeling I got. Same feeling as I got with these 19 guitars that I had before this little guy here, Frank the guitar. It was this whole like, wow, this feels so great, but it's not quite, right? So close, but it's not quite. And that's just how it was, man. And so I'd be, attending these churches, and it felt really, really great to a degree. But there was like this little bit of like, shoot, there's something that's just not quite, so close. And yet not what it needs to be. So same thing with those relationships. That's a big one, man. Or, even friendships, like just being around people that there's a lot to it that feels really good. You've got a lot in common. You really get along, but it's just not actually something that's going to be a good thing to have over a long period of time. So, it's something that's hard to hear. I'm not choking up on my words. I'm literally choking because of all the adjustments I'm doing within my own physical body. But a lot of that stuff, I mean, you can be really good friends with people that are just not quite the best people to spend like all your time with. But as far as like, going into a marriage is really what I'm meaning by relationships within this episode of the podcast. Because, yeah, man, I mean, in the Image Clothing Company podcast. Yeah, when we get around people who we really like the company of, and really a lot of that is just us learning about ourselves and learning what we need and learning how we operate. Even though we are ourselves, we don't really know who we are a lot of the time. At least we have a really high potential to not quite know who we are, and that's great actually. So this life is for, is to just really fully understand who we are, as far as we are sons and daughters of our living God, Jesus the Christ. And that's something that we deepen as we get into relationships like that are just really not quite that great for us. They're great for us in the sense of teaching us a lot. And right, these guitars taught me a lot. These kind of things where we're so close with stuff, but it's just not quite. And it seems like a punishment. It seems like a tormenting thing to have to deal with. And like maybe we've done something wrong, is what we start to feel like, to like get ourselves into a situation where, well, where do we go? Because if you don't know that it's not quite, and you think maybe it is just right, but then why does it feel so wrong? We feel that way about stuff a lot, and we just learn. That's how it was with the shoelacing technique that we use for In the Image Clothing Company, that I came up with. I mean, I didn't, in the sense of like, people have been tying their shoes, however they've been tying their shoes forever. And as long as there's been shoelaces or any way to tie something around your feet to protect them. So by no means did I make it up, but it's the one that I found out of, not knowing what to do, and shoes coming laced all sorts of ways, and me always tying my shoes unevenly until the time that I said. So, you know, there's so many different lacing techniques and combinations that I tried and tried and tried, and it was driving me crazy, because it's just a rope on the feet, and so it's altering the whole body if it's not. Yes, right? And so, yeah, that's cool. And that's how it was, man. I mean, I was really going through a lot of physical torment, and my body was not operating naturally at all because of that reason in those times. So that was a big thing. It's like, I don't know what's even going on. I didn't know I was gonna have a clothing company at that point, but it was, just a little while before founding In the Image Clothing Company. And shoot, man, I mean, it's just a lot of torment physically in that way, but it went into emotions and everything, right? It's all connected in the ways that it is. And so, shoot, I mean, that was a lot to deal with. Tying shoes wrong, lacing shoes wrong, but like, I was close in ways. Holy cow. All these things were so close, but we're not quite. And yeah. Well, another thing, dude, I'm yawning. I mean, I don't yawn rarely ever in the past quite a good portion of time in my life. But well, it's funny, man. All these adjustments within my body. So close but not quite, dude. I mean, how you can get that with anything, because the material within clothing too. I was not knowing that I needed to be specific about materials. And so no matter what I was learning within how clothing needed to fit, well, even like the shoelacing, you know, well, the point is that if the material was wrong, it didn't feel right no matter what. And with shoelaces, we need very sturdy shoelaces with no give, ideally no give in them at all, because that way the muscles within the feet can predict the reaction that the shoelace will have to what they're doing inside of the shoe, the feet, you know? Yeah, it's so huge to have no give within shoelaces, drawstrings, clothing in general, all of it. And so those kind of things, where I was doing a lot that I was doing and it was right, except for certain things, it was just so close, man. But just a little bit that needed to be tweaked. So, you know, that's crazy, dude. Really. Because I've been in relationships, like I was discussing, definitely, approaching not only just other Christian churches within this past little recent time of my life, being out of the true church, don't believe me, but right? The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, even when I was a member, because I was born into the covenant, as we say within the church. And even in that time, I was still, like getting a little bit caught up in other religions and other beliefs and trying to like see what's all this about, and it's close. A lot of it's really close. A lot of it's got some pretty good teachings in it and some pretty good ways of being in it, but it's just not quite. And it's not quite to the point where you're going to not ever feel okay there, no matter how close it is. Because, I'm talking about other religions besides Christianity, and then even within other Christian churches, after knowing the fullness of the gospel through the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, from that point, nothing else will ever feel as good. So that's how it is. Don't take my, I don't know how to phrase that because I want you to be able to take my word for things, but I always say don't believe me. I'm not trying to push anything. I'm just telling you how it is. So there you go. Yeah. Shoot, brother. It's crazy, man. I mean, so much potential in our lives to be just really, really close to the right thing, but not quite there. And the whole thing is the way that we're going to be fully there, fully rooted, fully understanding of the things that we need to be is by praying, by asking our God what he needs from us, how to do it, how to approach it, and he will answer. He will give it to us in the ways that he needs us to know, not the ways that we want. So that's a big thing is it's not about what we want ever, no matter what. And we're human beings who have desires. So that's something that we have to learn how to navigate, but we can. So, yeah. I mean, even something as simple as like the stringing technique on guitars, well, it's like the shoelacing in shoes. It's something people overlook, but it's going to be the make or break with your experience in either case. So, yeah. Shoot, this is really beautiful because it's cool because, I mean, even stuff like the thumbs, I always talk about how the thumbs really aren't the problem. When we get all this bound up muscle in the thumbs of our hands, that's not the problem. That's just a symptom of the problem, like we go on mental health medication for things we're experiencing that we don't know how to navigate, but it's not going to fix it because you're not getting to the root of the problem. You're just addressing like a symptom of something that you're experiencing. The thumbs are only being inhibited if in the cases that they're commonly being that way nowadays, if the pinky and the pointer finger are being pressed in alignment with the middle two fingers when the hand really is round here in that open palm, then the thumb's compensating, and so then the thumb will be the thing with the symptoms, but it's not the problem, right? And there's a lot of things like that. Mental illness, what gets labeled as mental illness is just warfare. We live in a world with a lot of evil. And if people don't understand how to navigate that and don't know how to look to their God, then they can really just not know what to do. And yeah, so there's a lot of so closes, but not quite in the world. There's a lot of ways of approaching things that are just so close, but not quite, ways of, well, I mean, it's like Christmas, the way that we look at it in a worldly way. It's such a close thing. I mean, there's a lot of good within the holiday of the worldly way of Christmas, the way that, it is celebrated around the world, but like not fully realizing what it actually is, and is just well, not just as in downplaying it, but I mean, it's the biggest thing there is, really. It's the day that we celebrate the birth of our God. And, we've got Santa Claus across the earth, and there's reasons to that. And a lot of that even comes from good things, within the gospel that just kind of took a little bit of a slightly wrong turn, That's just how it really is when you go back to the history of it, And so that's the whole thing. Like, yeah, Christmas. It's a beautiful thing, even in the way that the world sees it to a degree, because it's about giving and it's about gathering together and it's about love and connection within family. And sure, those are good things, but it's just that's not really what Christmas actually is, and so it's like so close. And yeah, it's important to kind of mention that within scripture, that's what we're told, the adversary, the enemy, the devil, really, if we want to just get straightforward with it, right? He takes things and he just twists them very slight. It's like our lustful desires where we look at things out of ways of perversion as human beings, which we all have the tendency to do to the degrees that we do. I mean, those kind of things, it's a good thing for us to look at members of the opposite gender, the opposite sex, with, you know, what word am I going to use here that's the proper one, right? I mean, how do I approach this? It's good for us to be attracted to the opposite sex, but it's not good for us to lust after that. And so, right, that's the thing is we're supposed to be, in fact, is the first commandment that was given to multiply and replenish the earth. We're supposed to, take part in behaviors that we can create families through, right? And have children. But then it gets slightly twisted and something so beautiful becomes so evil because it's so close, but there's not that foundational knowledge of the gospel of Jesus Christ that shows us how to approach things like that. And so then people tend to kind of approach them just about however they want, and that's very damaging to human beings forever. Meaning at any time period and whatever it looks like with any of these things that we're talking about, it's damaging. When you're really, really close to something, but you're just not quite there, that's worse than just not ever being close at all to something that could be good. Yeah, seriously, that's really how it is. So, yeah, a lot of stuff. I mean, well, it's like we can talk about chiropractors within this because going to the chiropractor, which is somebody who does adjustments within your body, and they pop you, like popping your back or your hips or your joints within your body, your spine, your anything really, but that's the most common things. People put so much focus on the spine, and really the spine is just going to do what the hips and shoulders are going to do. And the hips and shoulders are going to do what the feet or hands are going to do. And so you have to look at the body as a whole, right? Same thing, so close, but if you're going back to the chiropractor, there must be something that you're missing because if they're intending on aligning your body, then it should be aligned afterward, unless there's something major that happens. And so chiropractors are close with what they're doing, but they don't actually get to the root. It's like the mental health medication. It's close. I mean, you might find some relief with this kind of stuff to a degree, but it's not going to fix it because you haven't gotten to the root of what's happening. You've just addressed the surface level symptom. And, that's why I mentioned chiropractors is because the actual reason, it's not an opinion. It's not because we have a clothing company. I'm trying to make it seem like that. No, the actual reason for imbalances within human bodies is, and I don't want to say there's only one reason that it could possibly be, but the biggest and the reason, unless you know what happened, is clothing. Period. Yeah. So, and there's no pain to that. That's why I kind of approached it like that, a little bit like deliberately trying to give a little bit of a precursor to what I was saying before I did, because it's not. Yeah, I mean, that's it, it's so close, right? I mean, you're doing workouts because you think you need to get your body to function, but no, really, you need to just allow your body to not be pulled on and twisted and stuff by clothing. It's the only thing placed on us physically, so it really is the problem. So, yeah. And with that, I'm going to give a little context because I say that and it's the case because holding something like the things we have nowadays that are just so unnaturally flat when our hands are rounded, we wouldn't do that if our body wasn't already being pulled on by other things that's putting it into such a similar position already. I know I said already twice, but yeah, we wouldn't hold something like that because we'd realize it was hurting our bodies. But the position that is putting us into is a similar position we're already in chronically because of clothing, drawstrings, shoelaces, oversized things, imbalances, the things we discuss. That really is how it is, and that's a good thing to kind of document within this too. Not only just for talking about it for the sake of like so close with things, but for documentation, for future reference. If people are wondering if I knew like at the founding of the company, just because I want to be transparent, right? And I don't want to. I've talked about this how I don't want like as time goes on to be saying like, oh, I knew that all along, and when I didn't really. I mean, I really do understand most all of this stuff. I really just do. So that's how it is, right? I mean, even flat fretboard guitars, if you're wearing an oversized shirt, the rounding in your hands is kind of, well, I'm not even going to say kind of, it's like pretty much the exact same thing as the arches within the feet. If you have collapsed arches, you're going to have collapsed hands. That really is what's happening. And so oversized shirts will collapse your hands, and then you have collapsed arches in your feet. And now playing something flat might not feel so unnatural because your hands are working like this rather than activated muscles in an open palm. Okay, so good context, good documentation. I love that. So, but yeah, so close, right? I mean, people are like, well, I've been playing a guitar that's got a flat fretboard, somebody might be saying, and I know they've been around for so long. They've been around longer than anything with a radius in it. Yeah, except for like very specific ones, and just meaning, I don't know. I wasn't back then, but it's classical guitar. They've been around for so long. But people's bodies have been functioning in ways that are just so damaging to them and chronically stuck in those states until they know what they can do to change it. So, yeah, I mean, things feel good because it's meshing with our current state. But if our current state isn't natural, then hey, let's address it. So, yeah. Yeah, Well, that's the thing. I mean, I'm not trying to talk down on any Christians because that's just not what I'm doing at all. But people within other denominations of Christianity, if you get introduced to the gospel of Jesus Christ through the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and if you get introduced to the Book of Mormon, even though it's like one of the most controversial books on the planet, there's a reason for that. And once you start to read it, you will never go back. If you can like open yourself up to, trying to really pray through and see if it's true, you will find that it is. Don't believe me. But it's like those Christian churches, right? You're so close, but you're not quite within the fullness. And I'm not saying something, but I'm saying that because I've got experience on all ends, right? I voluntarily removed my records from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and now I'm coming back. And my intention in removing them was to go to other Christian churches and still deepen my relationship with Christ. So, I've got a lot of experience with this whole so close stuff in a lot of ways. So that's how it is, man. A lot of things are very, very close, but just no, you are not quite there, bud. Sorry. Because there's only one truth in everything, right? There's only one guitar setup that's actually going to accommodate for the human body. There's only one shoelace technique that's actually going to accommodate for the human feet. There's only one church that actually has the fullness of the truth within it, and that's the one I'm mentioning, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. There's only one position the shoulders connect into. There's only one position the chiropractor can adjust any part of your body back to, because there's only one position the body actually works in. That's what I mean when there's only one truth. There is. Don't believe me. But that when we just start talking about things and I, shine light on stuff like that, then you can see what I'm saying. So, yeah, there you go, right? I mean, so a lot of times we're just so close, but we're just not quite there, and that's a frustrating thing, can be, and rightfully so, definitely rightfully so. But we learn from things like that, and sometimes it takes a long time. But I said at the start of this episode, good things take time. I mean, I've had some things in my life that have taken so long to do what I would say is like get off the ground, whatever that means. But well, I guess a little bit of like explanation of what that means is picture a runway. You're in a little airplane and you've got a runway, just like this long strip of road that the airplane's wheels are on before it gets enough speed to get off the ground. I mean, good things take time. It takes a good amount of time to get up to the right amount of speed to where you can then take off. You can't just go from sitting there on the ground with an airplane the way that they traditionally fly and then fly. Like you got to go along the runway first. Just came up with that on the spot and it worked well. So cool. Kind of like unconventional analogy, but pretty much exactly what I'm saying. That's really cool. Yeah, good things take time. So, a lot of times we're really close. And yeah, I mean, we can really expound with that because when people were inventing airplanes, they were really close for a long time, but they couldn't quite fly. Yeah, they couldn't quite stay in the air, but they, persistence, and then there you go. Now you've gotten off the ground, but now you also learned what you needed to from all those designs that were so close, even though they weren't right. And so we need perspective in things because that's what helps us be understanding with people and situations that we don't expect and a lot of times just kind of do understand and don't want to have to deal with. We need those foundational understandings and like perspectives to be able to just navigate stuff like that. I mean, we're just human beings, man. We're always just going to be what we are already. So kind of like get comfortable with it, And within that, we're always just going to have things that we don't quite know, but we're pretty close with, pretty close to. And that's just how it's always going to be. So the biggest thing is just knowing who knows. That's what it always comes back to. Always, not just within the Image Clothing Company podcast because we're having discussions specifically on the gospel of Jesus Christ, but just because the gospel of Jesus Christ is the truth of all things. That's what it always comes back to, is just knowing who knows, because we won't always know anything or everything on either end. But he does on every end. He always knows everything before it happens, actually, which is something that's hard to understand. But that's the thing, right? Is we need to be okay with just being so close to things and not being quite right. We need to be okay with not being right fully. Because even when we do know things in depth, a lot of times we just don't know certain little aspects of it. I mean, I mentioned like how I know the human body in depth, and I do, but I haven't like read textbooks or things that are showing like every bone in it and every function of every joint and things, like, you know what I mean? To the point where there's people who know more in ways than I do, and there's things that I know more in ways than others, but no matter who it is, none of us are ever going to know anything fully. Yeah, we're not. We're going to know things really, really well and really, really closely to the fullness of what it is if we're just deepening our understandings and knowledge of things, but there's just so much to know, and there's so much variety and diversity within something that might seem so simple, even to the point that, I mean, we could never stop learning, but we could also never stop messing up and not quite being exact about things. I mean, we're just gonna be so close, but not quite perfect. Just we're never gonna be perfect in this life. That's the whole thing. When you're building a building, and doing measurements and trying to get it all right, and it's never gonna be like exact, but we're pretty darn close. We're building skyscrapers that just stay up. That boggles my mind. I mean, I think about a 3-4 story building, and I'm like, that's really shocking that that stays up through, like minor earthquakes and wind and all the weather and whatever's happening to it. And then you've got skyscrapers that are just so crazy tall, so many stories tall. And there's nothing perfect about that building, but it's really close, Like, we're just gonna always only be able to be so close with things. And we just have to be okay with that and content with it. Otherwise, you're just going to be upset about it, and it's never going to change in this life. So, yeah. So, anyway, yeah, that might be just about all I'm going to say for this episode of the podcast, because that's the takeaway from it, is that no matter what, we're always going to be imperfect, as I always mention when I discuss the gospel, because that's how it is. And that's why we look to our perfect God in everything, ideally praying continuously without ceasing, because he wants us to always talk to him and look to him, because he actually does have all the answers. So when things in our life feel so good, but we just can't quite tell why they don't feel great, we're probably really close to something, but just need to tweak something a little bit. And that's fine, because it's really good to be wrong. And it's good to be able to know that we're actually supposed to be content with being wrong. And that's when we learn. We learn when we ask questions. We learn when we mess up. We learn when we keep trying, when we're close, but it doesn't quite feel right. And we know we should just keep continuing on a similar path, but praying through how to approach furthering what we're doing. So, yeah, cool. So close. Now, we are in the Image Clothing Company. We will have clothing available. Ow, my leg, man. Yeah, made out of 100% natural materials, staying centered, fitting correct, allowing the body to work. Just get it in your size. We do not do oversized clothing here because it's going to damage your body. Check out what we have, though. I discuss the anatomy of the human body in ways, and it's great to know because you have one. So knowing how it functions is a wonderful thing, something I didn't know until within the past year. Yeah, it's really cool to be able to know. That's so crazy, dude. That's so humbling. Because, yeah, I mean, even in my past, working out and things, knowing what certain muscles did and functions of things like that, I didn't know really what the body actually was or did. It's funny how out of touch we can actually be and how misled we can be, even when people aren't trying to mislead us, because we're just misled people ourselves who are so close, but just not quite there, So that's why I say don't believe me. Don't listen to me. Don't listen to other people. Pray about it. That goes for me too. Cool. So today is the 23rd of January, 2025. My name is Evan Strong, as I mentioned, the founder of In the Image Clothing Company. Thank you for listening to this episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast. And I really want to hit that point home that we're always going to have the potential to be just so close with things, and we're always going to be just slightly off of everything, even things that we know very well, even things that we're an expert in, and actually an expert in. So realizing our place and realizing that our God knows it, and we can only know it to a degree that is really, really close, but just not fully, no matter what it is. We're always going to have questions. We're always going to have slip-ups, what we call backslides, and things that we do that aren't ever going to perfectly be fully correct. We're always just, as human beings, damned to being only so close. So, yeah, that's a beautiful thing to be able to understand, because we have to accept it, whether we want to or not, because that's all that we are. That's why we are in this state, is to realize that we can't do it alone. So, thank you.